The dog who lost his sense of smell but never forgot his owner's smell. Bob was a special dog. From an early age, he had such a powerful sense of smell that he could smell rain before clouds even formed. He knew when the neighbor was baking a cake, even if it was just down the block. But there was one scent he loved more than all, the scent of his owner, Helena. Helena adopted him when he was still a puppy, all gangly, with paws too big for his body. She picked him up, looked into his eyes, and said, "You're going to be my best friend." And Bob shook his ass like he already knew this was going to be the first day of the rest of his life. For years, they were inseparable. Helena talked to Bob as if he were a person. She took him to the park every Sunday, gave him special treats on rainy days, and at night, before bed, she always caressed him behind the ear, that place only she knew exactly how to touch. Time passed, and Bob grew older. His fur began to turn white around his eyes. His walks in the park became slower. He couldn't hear as well anymore, but he still sniffed everything around him. Until one day, something strange happened. Bob woke up and couldn't smell anything. Nothing. Not the food, not the grass, not the pillow Helena slept on. The world went silent with smells. The vet said it was irreversible. Bob had lost his sense of smell, and over time, he also lost his sight. For a dog, this could be the end of the world. But Bob wasn't just any dog. Even without smelling or seeing, he knew when Helena was near. It was as if his heart had learned a secret path to hers. When she walked through the door, he didn't need to see or smell. He felt it. The way the air shifted, the soft sound of her footsteps, but above all, something invisible, coming from within. That connection no one could explain. Once, Helena was gone for days. Bob lay quietly in the corner, waiting. No one could cheer him up. But the afternoon she returned before anyone could even say anything. Bob slowly got up, his paws trembling, and walked to the door. There she was. He wagged his tail like in the old days, and even though he couldn't see or smell, he rested his head on her lap and sighed deeply. His heart, old and tired, never forgot what was true. And in that moment, everyone understood. True love doesn't need eyes or smell, just the memory of the heart. Bob lived his last days like this, always knowing when she was near, guided not by his senses, but by something greater, something eternal. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like this, stories that remind us that true love is never lost. Bob began to live in a silent, scentless world, but curiously, this didn't make him feel any more distant from Helena. On the contrary, it seemed that, over time, he had learned to see her with his heart. It was as if, even without the senses that guide most dogs, Bob had developed a new kind of perception. Something subtle, almost magical. Mornings were always special. Helena had a habit of waking up early, making coffee, and playing some calming music as the sun began to stream through the living room window. Bob, even without seeing the golden light touching the floor or smelling the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, knew exactly when Helena would sit down on the sofa. It was at that moment that he would rise from his corner and with slow steps drag himself toward her. Each step seemed guided by an invisible compass that always pointed to the same destination, Helena's lap. She greeted him as she always did, with a gentle pat on the head and low, loving words. "Good morning, my friend. You felt I was here, didn't you?" Bob couldn't respond with words, but his body spoke for him. His breathing was light, his tail wagging slowly, his chest pressed against hers. It was as if, in that silent gesture, he were saying, "I never stopped knowing. I never lost you." Visitors to the house were captivated by this connection. They asked how a blind dog with no sense of smell could know so much about its owner. Helena simply smiled and replied, His heart knows mine, and no one can take that away. But not everything was easy. As the months passed, Bob began to move less. His legs grew weak, and he sometimes became lost in his own home. At night, he cried softly, as if afraid he wouldn't wake up next to her. Helena began sleeping on the floor next to him, on a simple mattress. He couldn't bear the thought of Bob feeling alone or lost in the dark. One night, a storm blew. The wind howled outside, and thunder shook the house. Bob had always been afraid of thunder, but now, unable to see the flashes or smell the rain, his fear was different. A fear of not being able to locate Helena, of losing the last link to the world he knew. Helena noticed. She lay down beside him, gently held his paw, and began humming an old song she used to sing when he was a puppy. A simple melody, but one that held memories of a lifetime. Bob relaxed, his breathing, previously labored, calmed. Even with the world falling apart outside, he was safe, because she was there. And that night, as the storm raged, the two remained together, as they always had been. A puppy who could neither see nor smell, and a woman who knew that the strongest love is the one that endures time, pain, and the loss of the senses. The days continued to pass, and Helena knew Bob's time on Earth was running out. But something inside her said, "He'll stay as long as he can, just so he won't leave you alone." And that's exactly what happened. One late afternoon, the sky was orange, and the wind blew gently through the curtains. Helena was sitting in the backyard, Bob lying beside her. He was breathing heavily, but his ears could still pick up the light breeze. Helena held his head in her lap, gently stroking his muzzle, already lifeless to the senses, but still full of tenderness. She whispered, "Do you remember that day, Bob? When I first held you in my arms? You were so small, and now you are my giant of love." Bob wagged his tail one last time, a slow, almost imperceptible gesture, but full of meaning. It was like saying, "Yes, I remember, and I'll never forget." At that moment, his eyes slowly closed. His heart, tired, beat once more, and then fell silent, but not from pain, from peace. Helena cried, but not out of despair. She cried out of gratitude, because she knew Bob hadn't left her. The love they'd built wouldn't die with his absence. It would remain there, in the details, in the silences, in the empty spaces filled with memories. And sometimes, when she walked through the house, she could still feel his presence. When the wind blew through the window, bringing an indefinable scent, she would smile and say, "Bob, you're here, aren't you?" Because the heart, she knew, the heart never forgets what is true. If this story touched you, if it awakened in you the memory of someone you love or loved deeply, subscribe to the channel and share. Because stories like this don't die, they live on in each of us. A few months had passed since Bob had left, and Helena's house was different. Not because things had changed physically, but because everything now held a kind of silence. A silence filled with memories. It wasn't empty, on the contrary, it was an inhabited silence. Every corner of the house held something of Bob. The rug where he slept, the kitchen door where he waited patiently for a loaf of bread, the old collar hanging behind the front door, still engraved with his name in slightly worn gold letters, Bob, friend forever. Helena missed him, of course. But there was something light in her grief, as if his presence lingered in a way she couldn't explain. Every day when she woke, she still made 2 cups of tea, one for herself and one that remained untouched, simply out of habit. At first it was painful to see that cup there, full, untouched. Then it became a gesture of affection, a silent ritual that kept Bob present in the little things. One afternoon, while tidying up the old trunk in the living room, Helena found something she hadn't seen in years, a notebook. She'd started that notebook when Bob arrived in her life, writing about his mischief, his outings, his discoveries. Over time, she stopped writing, but in that moment, flipping through those pages was like reliving everything. There, Bob's first day at home was recorded. Today, Bob arrived. He looks like a clumsy little ball of fur. He's chewed my shoes, he's peed on the carpet, and yet, I feel like he's going to change my life. And he changed. On the following pages were memories of their trips together. Helena had never liked traveling alone, but with Bob, anything seemed possible. He would sit in the car seat, staring out the window, sniffing the wind, as if each trip were a new adventure. She vividly remembered a trip to the countryside when Bob chased butterflies so hard he ended up rolling down a hill. He came back all dirty, with his tongue hanging out, as if to say, "It was worth it." Helena laughed as she remembered. She laughed and cried, as we often do when we truly miss someone. But what surprised her most was the last entry in that notebook. She didn't remember writing it, but the handwriting was hers. Perhaps it was in Bob's final days, when she already knew her time with him was short. The entry read, "He no longer sees, no longer smells, but he still knows everything about me. I don't know if it's a miracle or love, maybe both. Bob isn't fading away, he's becoming eternal." That phrase kept echoing inside her. It was then that Helena had an idea. She didn't want Bob's story to end there, within those silent walls. He had been so much more than a dog. He had been a companion, a confidant, a part of her. And she knew there were many people in the world who needed to hear that story, who might be experiencing the pain of losing someone, and who needed to be reminded. True love doesn't end. It transforms. It endures. Helena decided to write a book. She started small. Every night, she would sit in the same chair Bob used to lie beside and write. She remembered every detail. The way he'd cuddled up, the sound of his paws on the hardwood floor, the way he knew when she was sad, and she would simply sit beside him, silently, as if to say, "You are not alone." The book was taking shape, but it wasn't just about Bob. It was about everything he taught, without saying a word. About presence, about loyalty, about the invisible connection that goes beyond the senses. Helena wrote about how Bob had lost everything that was typical of a dog. His sight, his sense of smell, but never lost what made him unique. The ability to love and recognize love, even in the dark, even in silence. Months later, the book was finished. Helena titled it, "The Heart Does Not Forget." She didn't expect so many people to be interested. It was just her story and her old dog. But something unexpected happened. People started reading it and connecting with her. Letters started arriving from strangers, from other parts of the country, even from abroad. People told stories about their own dogs, cats, grandparents, parents, children, people saying, "I had a Bob too." And that's how Helena discovered that their story wasn't just theirs. It belonged to everyone who had loved deeply and lost, but who, deep down, never stopped feeling the presence of that love. One day, during a book signing, a child approached. He had curious eyes and was holding the book carefully. "Is it true that Bob could no longer smell his owner?" she asked. Helena smiled. She knelt beside the girl and replied, "It's true." But he remembered. His heart remembered. Because true love, my dear, doesn't depend on eyes or nose. It lives here. And he pointed to the girl's chest. The child smiled and ran off to tell his mother. At that moment, Helena felt a gentle breeze pass through her, like a whisper of the soul. A slight shiver ran across her skin, and she knew Bob was there. Not with eyes, not with scent, but with the same silent presence as always. Helena had never imagined that Bob's simple yet profound story could transform so many lives. With each new message, each new letter she received, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. That old dog, who had lost his sense of smell and sight, but never his essence, now served as a bridge connecting strangers through the most universal feeling of all: love. Among the letters, one in particular caught her attention. It was from a lady named Donna Maria, a woman who lived alone in a small town in the countryside. She said that she had recently lost her dog, a stray dog named Tito, who had also gone blind and deaf in recent years, but who had never lost the sparkle in his eyes or the joy of being with her. Donna Maria said that Helena's book had brought comfort to her heart, and that, for the first time, she felt ready to let go of the sadness and embrace the good memories. Helena read the letter several times. She felt a tear fall, but it was a warm tear, the kind born of hope. And in that moment, she realized her mission was just beginning. So, with the support of some friends, Helena decided to create a project called Memorias de Corazón, Heart Memories, a support network for people who lose their four-legged companions and are facing the pain of grief. The project brought together stories, meetings, videos, messages of strength, and above all, a lot of love. In the first meetings, what was most striking was the silence between the participants. A silence filled with emotion, where each seemed to search in the other's voice for a light to follow. Helena told Bob's story, detailing the days when he could no longer see or smell, but knew Helena was there. She spoke of his gaze, the way he listened to her heart, even without being able to use the senses most used to. Connect. A man named Joaquim then spoke, his voice breaking. I didn't see my old Max anymore either. We lost him a year ago. But I felt, in the silence of the house, that he was still waiting for me. Bob and Max were the same. Love like that never dies. Another woman, Anna, remembered her cat who had recently passed away. She said that, contrary to what many people think, animals feel everything, not just with their bodies, but with their souls. Bob was living proof of this. These stories multiplied, and Helena felt increasingly empowered to continue. Each shared story was a seed planted in the garden of love Bob had cultivated. One afternoon, during one of these meetings, while the group was sharing stories, a young couple arrived. They said they had just adopted a puppy, but were afraid of getting attached and suffering later. Helena looked at them tenderly and said, "To love is to open yourself to life. It's to accept that, in the end, all that remains is the memory of what was true." Bob taught us this. He didn't lose what was most important, even when everything seemed to have disappeared. The couple's eyes shone, and in that room filled with stories, tears, and laughter, Helena understood that she had built more than a project. She had created a family united by unconditional love, by the strength born from pain, and by the certainty that the heart never forgets what is true. As the sun set outside, dyeing the sky golden, Helena sat on the porch, watching the stars begin to shine. She felt a gentle breeze touch her face, bringing a familiar feeling. It was as if Bob were somehow there, gazing up at the sky with her. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you, my friend, for everything." And in that moment, Helena understood that Bob's true story would never end. Because his love lived on, not only in her heart, but in the hearts of all who learned, from him, that true love is eternal. Helena never imagined that by telling Bob's story, she would open a door to so many lives. With each message she received, with each meeting of the Memories from the Heart project, she realized that the pain of loss was a shared journey, a road many traveled alone, until they found a space to heal. One autumn morning, she received an unexpected invitation. A local school wanted her to tell Bob's story to their students, young adults dealing with various losses in their lives. Helena felt a mixture of joy and apprehension. How could she convey all that emotion, all that tenderness to a class that might never have experienced the loss of such a special friend. On the appointed day, Helena entered the classroom, a simple space filled with tables and chairs. The attentive eyes of those young people, curious and somewhat suspicious, met hers with silent expectation. She began by telling Bob's story as she always did, talking about the joy he brought, the connection he forged even when he lost consciousness, the love that endured through time and absence. As she spoke, she noticed something happening in those faces. Some looked at the ground, others bit their lips, but they all seemed to be traveling with her in that universe of affection and longing. Helena spoke of how Bob, even blind and without a sense of smell, knew when she was near. She said his heart was a faithful compass, unfogged by the shadows of the world. After the story, a student timidly raised her hand and asked, "How can we find that strength in our own hearts when all seems lost?" Helena smiled and replied, "Strength doesn't lie in forgetting pain, but in letting it teach us to value the love we had." Bob didn't forget Helena, because his love was greater than any loss. You too can find this light, within yourselves, in memories, in gestures, in the people you love. A profound conversation ensued. The students shared their own stories of loss, friends who left, family members who were distant, dreams that were shattered. And amidst those voices, Bob's story became a beacon, an invitation to embrace life, even with its imperfections and goodbyes. That day, Helena realized that Bob's legacy was much greater than she had imagined. It was a life lesson, a bridge between hearts that, despite their absences, continued to beat together. Leaving school, Helena felt the cool autumn wind caress her face. She looked up at the cloudy sky and smiled, feeling a familiar presence. Bob was there, invisible, but as real as the breeze touching her skin. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you, my friend, for showing me that love never fades." And that afternoon, as the leaves danced across the ground, Helena walked home with a heart full of hope. She knew their story would continue to be told, not just in words, but in every act of love that blossomed in the world. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey of love, remembrance, and healing. Because in the end, what matters is what remains, and what remains is eternal. Helena's home continued to hold vivid memories of Bob, but as time passed, something new began to blossom in that space, marked by love and longing. The memories from the Heart Project grew not only in number, but in depth, touching people of all ages and backgrounds. And among the many stories that reached Helena, one in particular awakened in her an intense desire to continue building bridges of love, courage, and hope. It was the story of Miguel, a boy who had lost his best friend, a dog named Lua. Miguel recounted that Lua, though young and full of life, had been diagnosed with a disease that quickly sapped his energy and heightened senses. Lua became blind, deaf, and gradually lost his sense of smell, just like Bob. But Miguel said something that touched Helena's heart. "Even so, Lua never stopped recognizing me. It was as if the love that united us was a light that illuminated the darkness in which he lived." Helena felt an immediate connection with that story. It was living proof that true love transcends everything: illness, distance, time. With Miguel's consent, she invited him to participate in the project's next meeting so he could share his own version of that journey. On the day of the meeting, Miguel arrived shyly, carrying a small box filled with objects that reminded him of Lua. A faded collar, a worn toy ball, an old photo. He sat in the circle, and with a slightly shaky voice, he began to speak. He spoke of the joy Lua brought to his life, of the nights he would sit beside her and feel the silent presence of that faithful friend, even when his senses were no longer fully functioning. "It was incredible," Miguel said, "how, even without seeing or hearing, Lua knew when I was sad. He didn't need eyes to see my heart, nor ears to hear my words. We were connected in a way I had never imagined. The people in the room fell silent, absorbing every word. An elderly woman held hands, another child wiped away tears, and Helena felt that this story was another thread of light woven into the delicate fabric that united this group. After their meeting, Helena and Miguel walked together through the garden. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with warm hues. They talked about the meaning of lasting love, the legacy our furry friends leave us, and the power of telling these stories to heal pain. Miguel confessed that before hearing Bob's story, he felt like Lua's loss was a void impossible to fill. Now, he understood that emptiness could be a space where memories blossom and love is renewed. Helena smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. She knew that Bob, wherever he was, would be smiling too. Because like him, Lua and so many other dogs and cats who lost their physical senses but never their love, continued to live on in the hearts of those they loved. That night, as she lay in bed, Helena looked up at the ceiling of her room and whispered, "Thank you, Bob, for teaching me that love is greater than everything." And so, with an open heart and the certainty that Bob's story was much more than a simple memory, Helena continued writing, sharing and living what she learned from her faithful friend. Helena often sat at her kitchen table, where a small vase of wildflowers Bob had brought on his walks was always present. She liked to think that, somehow, that simple, delicate essence reflected her friend's soul, resilient, kind, and full of life, even in the face of hardship. Her life had changed a lot since Bob left. Gone was the sound of paws running through the house, nor that keen sense of smell that announced the presence of rain or an unexpected visitor. However, the silence brought an invisible companion, an untouchable affection that filled the space with comfort. One afternoon, looking out the window, Helena saw a little girl walking through the park, accompanied by a small, playful dog. It was like a mirror of the past, a vivid reminder of the happy days she had shared with Bob. The girl smiled, holding the leash tightly, while the dog pranced happily around her. Helena smiled, feeling a mixture of longing and hope. That's when he heard a soft voice behind him. "You look a lot like someone I knew." It was Donna Maria, the lady who had once written him a letter telling him about her dog, Tito. She had come for a visit, bringing with her a book she had just published, inspired by the story of her own dogs and the strength of the love that united them. The two sat together, sharing stories, memories, and lessons learned. They talked about how love for these animals transcends the barriers of time and body, creating a bond that no one can break. Helena realized that, despite the pain of loss, there was a profound beauty in it all, a lesson about the fragility and strength that coexist in life. In that conversation, Helena discovered that many people, like her, missed not only their animals, but the constant presence they represented, a silent, faithful love that taught the importance of being present, of valuing each moment. She decided then that she needed to share this message with more people, that the story of Bob and so many other faithful friends could help transform the way the world views loss and grief. Inspired, Helena created a series of videos for the channel, telling the stories that came to her, giving voice to those who felt them, and celebrating the love that never dies. She used her own experience to show that even when it seems like everything is over, what remains is the memory, the feeling, the invisible presence that lives in the heart. One of the videos that most touched the audience was about Bob's last day. Helena recounted in detail the moment when, already exhausted, he curled up in her lap, took a deep breath, and left, leaving behind a lesson in love and courage. She described the gentle touch of her hand on the dog's head, the shared silence, and the certainty that this wasn't goodbye, but a see you soon. The comments were countless. People from different places told their own stories, shared their pain and hopes, and expressed gratitude for having found a space where love could be celebrated, even in absence. Helena felt part of something bigger, an invisible network that connected hearts around the world. And amidst this web of affection, Bob lived on, not in things, but in emotions, in memories, in the inspiration he gave to so many lives. One clear night, looking at the stars from the balcony, Helena whispered to the sky, "Thank you, Bob, for teaching me that true love doesn't depend on smell or sight. It depends on what we feel inside." She placed her hand on her chest, feeling the steady pulse, the eternal memory of that faithful friend who, even unconscious, never lost what was most important. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and join us in spreading this message of love, courage, and remembrance. Because what the heart loves, the heart never forgets. The sun was already sinking below the horizon when Helena decided to take a stroll through the park where she so often took Bob to run and play. The trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, and the smell of wet earth after rain still lingered in the air. Although Bob was no longer there to chase the flying leaves, every corner of that park held a memory, a story, an emotion. As she walked, Helena felt a mixture of melancholy and gratitude. Melancholy for missing the friend who had been with her for so many years, and gratitude for having been fortunate enough to share so many special moments. She closed her eyes for a moment and in the darkness of her mind, tried to see Bob as he used to be, chasing a ball, happy, with his tail wagging, and that look full of love. It was then that a child, with his dog by his side, ran past and smiled at Helena. The scene was simple, but it brought an unexpected warmth to her chest. As if, in that moment, Bob's essence was there, in the form of pure and spontaneous joy. She stopped near a bench and sat, letting her thoughts flow. She remembered the days when Bob could still see and smell the world, the smell of flowers, of food cooking, of Helena herself arriving home. How it had seemed so simple, yet so grand. And then she remembered the last gift Bob had given her. Not a toy, not a ball, but the certainty that true love doesn't depend on physical senses. Even when he lost his sight and his sense of smell, he never lost the ability to recognize, to feel, to love. This, Helena knew, was a silent miracle. At that moment, a gentle breeze touched her face like an invisible hug, a silent gesture from Bob saying, "I'm here. I've always been." She smiled, tears streaming down her face, and realized that connection would never fade. Back home, Helena sat at her desk and began to write. Not just for herself, but for everyone who, like her, carried in their hearts the memory of a love that could not be lost. Her words flowed like a river, recounting every detail, every feeling, every lesson Bob had left behind. She knew that story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who has loved and lost, to everyone who has found in the silence of absence a greater, deeper presence. And so, with an open heart and a soul filled with memories, Helena continued the journey of transforming pain into hope, absence into presence, silence into love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and become part of this network of love and memory. Because in the end, what remains, what truly remains, is what the heart never forgets. Helena didn't know exactly when that feeling began to intensify, but one day, she realized that even without Bob by her side, his presence seemed to fill the empty spaces in her house, her routine, her heart. It was as if her old friend had left a piece of himself embedded in every corner, an invisible scent, a silent touch, an embrace that transcended matter. That sunny morning, she decided to visit the veterinarian who had cared for Bob for the past few years. She wanted to talk, not only to reminisce about caring for her dog, but to better understand how an animal could maintain such a strong bond with a human, even after losing the senses that were essential to them. Dr. Paolo, a man with a calm gaze and a serene voice, listened attentively as Helena told him about the connection she felt with Bob, about the Memories from the Heart project, and how her faithful friend's story had touched so many people. "You know, Helena," Paolo said, adjusting his glasses, "dogs have something that goes beyond their physical senses. They have a spiritual sensitivity, an ability to perceive emotions and intentions that we can't always understand. That's why, even when they lose their sight or their sense of smell, they remain connected to those they love." Helena smiled, feeling confirmation of what her heart had been saying for a long time. "It's as if Bob taught us all that true. Love doesn't need to be seen or smelled to be felt," she replied. Dr. Paolo agreed, and together they discussed the importance of caring not only for animals' physical health, but also for their emotional and spiritual well-being. During that conversation, Helena decided it was time to expand the project even further. She wanted to create meetings, lectures, and spaces where people could learn to listen, feel, and connect with their animals on a deeper level. Because deep down, she knew that Bob wasn't just a dog who lost his sense of smell. He was a master who taught about the essence of love. Returning home, Helena sat on the porch and looked up at the blue sky, illuminated by the afternoon sun. She felt the wind touch her face, and for a moment, she imagined it was Bob there, beside her, his nose raised, feeling the air, even though it was invisible to him. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, my friend, for showing me the path to true love." And that afternoon, enveloped by the warm sunlight and the vivid memory of Bob, Helena understood that as long as the heart beats strongly, as long as love is felt in silence, the presence of those we love will never disappear. If you feel this connection, subscribe to the channel and follow this journey of love, faith, and memory. Because what the heart loves, the heart never forgets. The morning light timidly filtered through the living room window, illuminating the small details that filled Helena's home with memories of Bob. There, on the bookshelf, an old photo showed Bob with that curious look of someone who had just discovered the world. The collar hanging near the front door still carried the soft, almost imperceptible scent that seemed to resist the passage of time. Helena stood slowly, feeling the weight of absence, but also the strength of love that never fades. The Memories from the Heart project continued to grow, reaching people in places she never imagined. With each shared story, she felt that the invisible connection Bob had left continued to unite distant hearts. That day, Helena received a message from a young man named Lucas. He told her he had a dog named Thor, who was also losing his senses, but never failed to acknowledge his presence. Lucas spoke emotionally about how his four-legged friend helped him through difficult times, bringing light even when everything seemed dark. Inspired by that story, Helena decided it was time to give voice to these experiences. She planned a series of virtual meetings where people from different parts of the world could come together to share their stories, pains, and joys. It was a space for acceptance, for learning, for celebrating the love that transcends the physical. At their first meeting, Helena opened with Bob's story, detailing every moment, from the happy days of play to the silent days when he could no longer see or smell her, but knew exactly when she was there. Soon, other voices joined in. People spoke of their own companions, the challenges of loss, and the strength they found to carry on. Stories of dogs, cats, birds, and even horses who, despite hardships, maintained a deep connection with their humans. Helena felt part of a large family, united by love and memory. She knew that Bob had left a legacy that wasn't limited to his own story, but now belonged to everyone. After the meeting, she walked through the garden, feeling the sun warm her face. A butterfly landed delicately on the flower bob. loved so much. Helena smiled, feeling that this small creature carried a message. Life goes on, and love is renewed in every gesture, in every memory, in every beating heart. Looking up at the blue sky, she whispered, "Thank you, Bob, for being my guide, my friend, and my eternal companion." And so, with a heart full of hope and gratitude, Helena continued her journey, transforming pain into light, absence into presence, silence into love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and come be part of this community that celebrates true love, the kind that is never lost, that is never forgotten. Helena sat at her desk on a quiet morning, surrounded by old photographs and notebooks filled with stories. Her heart still beat strongly with longing for Bob, but also with the certainty that the love that united them was eternal, something that transcended the physical senses and time. She had realized, in recent months, that their story was not just an isolated memory, but a living thread connecting so many people around the world. While leafing through one of the notebooks, she found a letter she'd received from a man named Ricardo. He reported that after losing his dog Lucky, who had also become blind and deaf in the final years of his life, he felt completely lost. But when he read Helena's book, he found light. He said he realized that the love he felt for Lucky remained alive within him, and that this understanding had helped him overcome his grief and open himself to new affections. Inspired by this message, Helena decided to start a new chapter in her journey, creating a series of in-person and online meetings where people could share their stories, pain, and overcoming challenges related to loss and connection with their pets. She knew that Bob, in some way, was still guiding her steps. At the first meeting, people of all ages and backgrounds gathered. Among them were those who had just lost a furry friend, those facing the challenge of a beloved animal's advanced illness, and those seeking to understand the depth of bonds that transcend physical life. Helena told Bob's story with detail and emotion. She spoke of how he lost his sight and smell, but never stopped recognizing her presence. She described the moments of silence they shared, the gentle touches, the knowing looks that transcended the absence of ordinary senses. People listened, moved, some cried, others smiled. Everyone recognized themselves in the story. Then, they began to share their own experiences, stories of courage, love, loss, and rebirth. The encounter lasted for hours, with laughter and tears, words and silences. Helena realized she had created a sacred space where love was celebrated in all its forms, where pain found comfort and absence gained meaning. At the end, a lady approached and said, in a choked voice, "Thank you for helping me understand that my old Max is not gone, because he lives in every beat of my heart." Helena smiled, feeling the invisible embrace of those hearts that together continued to love and remember. That night, lying in bed, Helena closed her eyes and felt a deep peace. She knew Bob was there, not with eyes or nose, but with the essence of love that never dies. Helena woke early that morning with a different feeling, a mixture of nostalgia and hope that seemed to fill her entire being. The sun streamed in through the living room window, casting a golden light that touched every object, every corner of the house, where so many memories of Bob were stored. It was as if time had suddenly become lighter, and she could feel more intensely the invisible presence of her faithful friend. As she made coffee, her thoughts wandered to the most memorable moments she'd shared with Bob, from the day she adopted him as a gangly puppy to the final days when, even without seeing or smelling him, he recognized her with a look that went far beyond the physical. It was a look of the soul, of someone who knows what's true. That day, Helena decided to do something special. She grabbed an old photo album and sat in the garden, surrounded by the scent of the flowers Bob loved to smell. He began flipping through the pages, remembering every smile, every joke, every shared silence. As he relived those memories, his heart filled with gratitude. Bob had been more than a dog. He had been a master of love and courage, an example of how true connection goes beyond the senses and resides in the essence of being. Inspired by this certainty, Helena decided to write a letter to Bob. Not an ordinary letter, but a profound, heartfelt message that conveyed everything she hadn't been able to say while he was alive. She wrote calmly, each word charged with emotion. "My dear friend, you taught me to love unconditionally, to see beyond what the eyes can see, to feel beyond what the nose can smell. Even when your senses failed, your heart never lost, and I learned from you that true love never fades." As she finished the letter, Helena felt an immense peace. She carefully folded the page and placed it inside a book next to Bob's photos. She knew this was the way to keep the connection that united them alive, even in their absence. In the days that followed, Helena shared this letter on her channel, telling the story behind it and inviting her followers to write their own letters to those they loved and lost. The response was heartwarming. People from all over the world sent their letters, stories, and testimonies, creating a chain of love and healing. Helena realized that, just as Bob had touched her life, that network of affection was touching the lives of many others. It was a powerful reminder that, even in absence, love lives on, present in every gesture, every memory, every word, written or spoken. On a calm night, gazing at the stars, Helena felt a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper Bob's name. She smiled, closed her eyes, and silently gave thanks for that friend who, even without seeing or feeling it, never stopped loving her. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and join this community that celebrates eternal love. Because what the heart loves, the heart never forgets. Helena woke that morning to the shy sunlight streaming through the window, painting the walls golden hues. The silence of the house seemed charged with memories. Every corner whispered stories of her beloved Bob. She felt deeply that despite his physical absence, his presence remained. Alive, almost palpable, filling the spaces with an invisible and enduring love. In the kitchen, as she made coffee, her thoughts returned to that morning so many years ago when Bob first entered her life. A clumsy puppy, with curious eyes and a keen sense of the world's small wonders. Helena remembered the way he looked at her, as if he already knew they had found something special in each other, a friendship that would stand the test of time. His heart sank as he remembered the days when Bob began to lose his senses. His once sharp vision slowly faded, followed by his sense of smell, which allowed him to identify every familiar scent. But even in the face of these losses, there was something unbreakable about their bond. Bob knew, without needing to see or smell, when Helena was near. It was as if their love had created a secret language, a silent code that no physical sense could decipher, but which his heart understood perfectly. Helena decided to revisit the park where she so often took Bob to play. Upon arriving, she was greeted by the fresh smell of wet grass and the distant sound of children's laughter. She sat on an old bench, feeling the breeze caress her face and let the memories flood her mind. She pictured Bob chasing a butterfly, his tongue lolling out, his eyes shining with joy. And even when he stopped seeing, he continued to run, his heart full of life. She realized that Bob's essence wasn't trapped in a single moment, but spread throughout his entire existence in the little things they shared, the touch of his paws on the hardwood floor, the tender look that conveyed comfort, the quiet presence that never left her. Back home, Helena sat down at her computer and began to write. Her words flowed like a serene river, carrying not only Bob's story, but the feelings he evoked in everyone who knew him. She knew this story wasn't just hers, but the story of everyone who had ever loved and lost, of everyone who sought solace and hope in the memory of a faithful friend. As she wrote, Silent tears streamed down her face, mingling with smiles of gratitude. She knew that even though Bob was gone, he was still present, in his memory, in his love, in the strength he gave her to carry on. Night fell, and Helena, looking out the window at the starry sky, felt a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper her name. She closed her eyes and with a full heart gave thanks for having been lucky enough to experience such a pure and eternal love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and join this community of love and remembrance. Because what the heart loves, the heart never forgets. Helena woke that morning with a sweet, deep feeling, as if the very air around her was permeated with Bob's silent presence. The sun streamed in through the window, casting soft shadows on the living room floor where the old dog had so often rested. The silence of the house wasn't empty. It was filled with memories, small echoes of laughter, of footsteps, of a friendship that transcended time. As she prepared for the day, Helena felt the weight of absence, but also a renewed strength. She knew that Bob's love had not been lost, despite the limitations his illness had imposed on him in recent years. Even without sight or smell, Bob continued to recognize her heart, and that was enough to keep their connection alive, intense, and true. Determined to honor this connection, Helena returned to her studio, where she kept all the letters, photos, and recordings from the Memorias de Corazón project. There, amidst papers and smiles, she found new inspiration to continue her mission of transforming stories of loss into bridges of hope. She began planning a series of videos telling different stories of dogs, cats, and even birds who, despite physical limitations, maintained a deep bond with their humans. Each story was a piece of the tapestry of love that Bob had helped weave. For weeks, Helena dedicated herself to this task with passion. She interviewed people, read stories, and relived in their words the essence of what Bob had always represented. The certainty that true love depends not on the senses, but on the heart. In one of these videos, Helena told the story of Lara, a woman who cared for a blind dog named Nino. Lara described how Nino, even blind, knew exactly when she was coming home, as if his heart were an invisible radar capable of capturing the presence that only love can reveal. At the end of the video, Helena concluded, "Bob, Nino, all these friends show us that true love transcends any limits. Even when the world seems dark, when our senses fail, what remains is the invisible connection that unites hearts forever." The public's response was moving. People from different parts of the country and even the world sent messages sharing their own experiences, reinforcing the importance of this work. One night, after posting a video, Helena sat on the couch, looking at Bob's photograph on the coffee table. She felt a deep peace, as if he were there, smiling with eyes full of tenderness. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, my friend, for showing me that true love is never lost, even when the senses fail." And so, enveloped by silence and living memory, Helena continued her journey, certain that, as long as love is present, we will never be truly alone. Night had already enveloped Helena's house in its dark cloak, and the soft light from the lamp gently illuminated her face, marked by the emotion that Bob's story always evoked. Sitting in her favorite armchair, Helena felt her heart pounding, as if Bob were there, beside her, breathing in unison, sharing that moment of deep and genuine connection. She knew that what she had experienced with Bob wasn't just a story of loss. It was a story of unconditional love, of resilience, of bonds that endure time and the loss of the senses. It was a lesson for us all. True love doesn't need to be seen, touched, or smelled. It just needs to be felt in the heart. And it is precisely this love that she wanted to share with you. You who are there, reading or watching, may also carry a loss, a longing that seems immense, a void that seems impossible to fill. I want you to know, you are not alone. the heart that loves, even in absence, never forgets. And it is this strength that Bob taught me, and that I hope you feel now. In the next videos, we'll explore even deeper stories together, moments of overcoming, reunion, and healing. You'll meet friends who, like Bob, showed that love is greater than any limitation, that it transforms silence into presence, darkness into light. So, if you want to continue this journey with me, if you want to feel the powerful energy that only true love can generate, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell so you don't miss any chapter of this story that's just beginning. Because the heart's journey is long, and every step is worth it when taken with love. Remember, what the heart loves, the heart never forgets. Thanks for being here. See you in the next video, where we'll continue to discover together how true love can transform our lives, even when all seems lost. Stay with me. Your story matters too.